All right, hello, my friends. I'm going to start a workshop called the CDK Workshop, which allows you to use your favorite programming language, as long as your favorite programming language includes Node, um, Go, or Python, to create infrastructure as code in the AWS environment. And many of my former students are working at AWS, and they say that this is a preferred way internally that they're using, at least in their roles, to do infrastructure as code development within the AWS environment. So let's go ahead and get started on that. I'm not actually going to do the whole thing because if I recall, it could easily take 6 to 8 hours. And so in particular, to help some friends of mine out get started on this, I'm just going to do the first portion of it. So first I will if you just type in cdkworkshop.com and hit return, you'll see this immersion workshop that appears to be offered at AWS hosted events. This is not a hosted event. This is just us doing it on our own. And I haven't practiced this one recently. I haven't done it in several years. So this is going to be a little bit shaky as I have to do some reading while talking at the same time, which is not a good combination. But I understand what this is. Let's just go ahead and read it. It's an infrastructure as code toolkit called the Cloud Development Kit. There we go. And it should include all the good stuff in it that we need, probably code pipelines and stuff like that, etc. And so this first link right there, we don't need because we're not at a hosted event. But the second one says prerequisites, you need the AWS CLI installed. And so if you needed that, you would click on it. And like, for example, on my computer, it would say well, let's see. I think there's a link you can click on. Where's that at? There's a GUI installer. Oh, you just click on it, you download it. And then afterwards, let's just open this up. You should see something like if I type in which AWS, it'll show me that it's installed. So if you get that far, then you are in good shape. Oh, and actually that didn't work for you at all. So let me just show you what I just did. I forgot I was only sharing one window. All right, so let's, I'll just share that. So I just barely typed in which AWS and AWS version. I can see that, well, I've got this extra wide monitor, so I don't want to share my whole screen because then it'll look bad on your view. All right, let's get back to, so I'm gonna have to switch back and forth a couple times here, but hopefully we'll all live. All right, so back over to this screen. So one of the things was that AWS CLI. The next thing is we need, I'm guessing, an administrative user is usually what we need. So it says go in there, create a user, CDK workshop, give them access. Policy is admin access. So we can do that. All right, so as an example, I've gone into my AWS account. I type in IAM. I will create a user, call them CDK Workshop. And I want to give them permissions. So I will type in admin. I will give them administrator access. So that was the one thing I clicked. And it says review and create. Yep, I'll take that. And now I have a user, and I'm going to need some security credentials typically. So as I come over here to the user, oops, wait, let's try this one more time. Users, CDK Workshop, and we're going to go to security credentials, and we want to create some access keys or an access key. And we can use it for this, and it'll say don't use that, but yes, I understand what I'm doing. Basically, I'm generating a username and password that acts the same thing as if I had logged in as a user on my computer. And I am going to, in another window, open up a Word doc or just a place to keep track of the username and password I'm about to generate. So I don't need anything else. Here's effectively the username, and here is effectively password, and I am done. And let's say you didn't download it. Yep, I know. I'm okay. I wrote it down. All right, so we come over here, and after you've done that, um, you can type, ooh, I'm actually going to have to do this. So I need to type in AWS configure, and then there's a few steps I need to go through there. So basically, I need to paste in the username and password, and then I'll pick a region, and I'll just stick with the region that I'm, well, anyway, US East 1 is fine for this. I don't care too much. Okay, so, and I'm going to have to do that on my local terminal. So let me change my sharing so that I am now sharing my terminal instead, if I ever find that. All right, so I type in AWS configure, and I had a previous set of credentials in there that are gone because I deleted the user after I finished my previous tutorial, and I will stay in this default region, and I won't set any particular output. And now I am ready to go back. Let me see. You know, this is going to be easier if I can do a portion of the screen instead, but maybe, all right, so sorry to make this awkward, but I think in a minute I'm going to switch over to my other screen because that just might make this better. At any rate, because I'm going to have to be doing some coding here in a little bit. So, and actually, just in preparation for that, let me just hit pause on my recording, and then I'll set up in my neighboring window.
Okay, not only am I resuming recording, but I actually turned on the microphone that's right in front of my face rather than one that's over there on my computer. So the audio should sound notably better all of the sudden, ironically. Okay, I wonder how many videos I've made today where I was talking into my microphone, but I didn't have the microphone enabled. So be it. Life is glorious. We just like to embarrass ourselves in front of many people. Okay, let's continue on with the workshop here. And okay, so carrying on. Let me just double check I'm sharing the right screen. Looking good. Okay, so in here I set up my credentials a second ago. Next thing is you need to have Node.js installed, and I do have Node installed. I can type node-v and it's installed. If it is not installed for you, then you would go over to the website and you would install it. So it'll pick up on whatever computer type you're using. Um, so I think, so that's kind of funny that the CDK uses Node, but you can technically use JavaScript or Python or Go as long as you previously have Node installed. All right. Then it says pick an IDE, and I have VS Code downloaded, installed, and ready to go. So here's my little window, ready to do some fun stuff. Um, and so there's that. Okay, next one. Install the CDK. I don't believe that I have that installed. So let me switch over to this and I will type in npm install global AWS CDK, and let's see what happens. Ooh, lots of errors. Well, let me go take a moment and figure out what the error is. It has been a while since I've run this particular thing, so I will debug and come right back. All right, that wasn't terribly exciting. I just read the messages. It says you probably don't have permissions. So I did on my computer sudo super user do, and then I did the same command again, and I entered in my administrator password for my computer, and it said added one package in 3 seconds. So maybe I already had it installed or something, and it just needed to be updated. I don't know. Let's go ahead and check what we do next. CDK hyphen hyphen version. So CDK hyphen hyphen version. And it looks like we have something on there. Hopefully, it is one that is current enough that it's going to work. Looks like whatever I have is more current than what they're using, even though I haven't used this in several years at least. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next portion here. Um, so your three options are TypeScript, Python, or Go, and I will be using JavaScript. I teach both JavaScript and Python. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, just in case I do something dumb. But I am more familiar with JavaScript, and I actually don't do TypeScript. So I do Node, but I don't do TypeScript. I just don't have enough time. All right, let's get started. It says log into your code server environment. Um, so it's so this gets a little weird because it's talking about as if you were doing it on site, and we are not on site. So we're just going to, so let's just hope that things are going to work anyway. Um, okay, coming back to here on my computer, I have I have a place where I can put stuff. So I have a to delete folder that I always keep for things that I'm going to throw away. Things I keep in my synced Dropbox or box folders, but this one I'm not planning on keeping. So it says I need to make a couple of folders, one called CDK Workshop, and then I need to change my working directory into that folder. So I can do that in two commands. And so I'll just show you that I don't, and I can show you in another window as well. Um, so here's what it looks like. So I've got a couple folders in there, and actually I was getting ready to put it into this folder. Why not? Um, so cd AWS that, and then I'll paste in the command that they just gave me. I guess that's kind of redundant. So if I type present working directory, I am in this particular folder right now, or alternatively, I'm in this folder right here, and you can see the breadcrumb trail of where I'm at on my computer. So I've got a workspace that I'm ready to do work in, and just as a preparatory thing, I will grab Visual Studio Code, say open folder, go to my to delete folder, and I'm gonna find this um, folder that I just created and click open. And so this is now the same folder as this. So I'm in the same spot. All right. So, and one of the nice things about that is I can say terminal, new terminal, and now this terminal is in the exact same place as this one. So depending on how things go, I won't maybe need to use that one anymore. I guess the only bad thing is that the font's a little small on there. So maybe I will use the other one just so you can see better. Okay, it says use the CDK init to command to create a new project based on TypeScript. So CDK init is going to be called the sample app, so you could call it anything you want, and we're supposed to choose one of the available languages. So let's go ahead and do that. Copy paste. And you can see that in the folder, it is creating a bunch of stuff. Um, nice. You even have test functionality in there for probably unit testing are the things that we're going to be building. So cool, cool. All right, so let's go and see what the next step is. Oh, I mean, all the stuff we just saw. And then it talks to us about a lot of the commands that we will be using. So um, If we want to compile TypeScript to JS, we'll do npm run build. If we want to watch for changes and compile, npm run watch. If we want to run our unit tests using Jest, npm run test. If we want to deploy, now this is going to take anything that we're building locally in in this window once we start doing cool stuff with the files. If we say npm or if we say CDK deploy, it's going to push it out. If we want to compare um, what's on, I think on my computer versus what's in the cloud, we'll do CDK diff and CDK synth. I've used that. I can't remember exactly what that does. Emits the synthesized, probably like created CloudFormation template. So again, that seems like a form of deploy for the environment portion of things, but I can't remember without having done it in a couple years. But I distinctly remember using that command a bunch. Okay, so it's going to talk about what's our project directory. And so we've got like some binary folder, a library, a test folder, and then the other stuff. Let's see. This library one is where your application's main stack is defined. And so your stack is going to be, so remember that you have both your application and your stack. And your application is typically your programming code, and your stack is typically referring to AWS resources. So if we write some code that says, somewhere in here that says, create a VPC and create a firewall and create an EC2 instance. That's all part of our stack. Our stack usually refers to infrastructure. And then we have, within that stack, we usually run our application. And so perhaps that seems a little confusing, but we're writing code for our stack as well as for our application that would run on our stack and hopefully in different files or folders here so it'll be clear. So in another one that says this bin folder, the entry point for the application, it will load the stack. All right. Package JSON, we know about those sorts of things for package management, um, node modules. All right. And then it says, let's look at the CDK Workshop.ts. So this one says import the CDK library and some stack stuff, create a new CDK app. So let's just go ahead and check that real quick. So that was in lib, right? Oh no, it was in bin. Okay, so there's bin, so it's the first one. So there's that code. Create a new app um, and a new stack. Great. This code loads and instantiates the stack class. We don't need to look at this file anymore. I guess we should close it then. And then it says go into lib. It says this is where the meat of our application is. So these are some services that you may have used. I know I've used them, like the simple notification service, SQS, the simple queuing service. So we've got some different libraries that we can pull as possibly part of this sample application. And then it says export this. And so a topic is something that you create within their notification service. So this is going to be a little bit, and then you got your queue. Um, this is a little bit maybe out of the scope of what you're used to if you're used to just building regular applications because we're using like on an EC2 instance with some website on it. So this is basically using queuing and notification services, which is a different application than some people will work with typically. But it tells us right here that these are the things that it's working with. So at a high level, it looks like this is going to be using JavaScript effectively to create some AWS services on the back end. And at a high level, you could be technically building anything if you knew the right commands in JavaScript and you're using the CDK. So let's go on to the next page and let us go to, anyway, library, that. So there's the code that will do magic for us if we run it, a few different things. Apps are a definition. The apps are a definition of your infrastructure using code. So that makes sense. We're saying down here what we want our infrastructure in the cloud to be, but it's only when we push it and synchronize it with our cloud that it's actually running in the cloud in our account. Um, when CDK apps are executed locally, they produce or synthesize a CloudFormation template for each stack. So, CloudFormation is the infrastructure as code language that we use to create resources in the cloud with AWS. You could also use Terraform. So, what they just said there is that if you oops, that if you run this code, it will create a template document with some other code in it that AWS can create services from. So, so basically, this is like a layer of abstraction on that's going to create another abstraction that's going to create the actual files. So, um, fair enough. Oh, yeah, and so this makes sense. To synthesize, do this. Um, okay, let's type CDK synth. So here we are in this folder, and I will type CDK synth, and let's see if it does what it's supposed to do. It looks like it's creating something out here, and it spit out some text right here, which is our CloudFormation template. And I'm trying to see if it, where that was potentially created. Maybe right there. No. Anyway, it should be. I think it's anyway. So this file, this text here, should be up here somewhere. Maybe they'll tell us in a minute. But this is a file that you could have also written by hand rather than using the JavaScript to write this. But the whole reason of using CDK is to learn how to write code that generates this rather than write this directly. So if you're used to infrastructure as code, then this looks familiar to you, this type of syntax. So thank you for writing stuff for us. There we go. All right. Once we've got our template ready, which we do, and I wish I could instantly know where it had put that in that folder structure, but well, I'll just pause for a second and I'll just search around because I can't help it. I want to see where it put it. So one second. Okay, I just had to satisfy my curiosity. So it looks like it put the file that we're seeing in the terminal output. It put it in the CDK out folder that was recently created, and it created a file called CDK Workshop stack.template.json. And just if you're used to working with infrastructure as code, then you know um, that the CloudFormation, if you're writing it directly in the console with AWS, there's like usually like a tab in the console that says switch back and forth from YAML, which is this, to JSON. So it doesn't care. But they literally give you two different formats to write the exact same things. And it looks like when they're creating it in here, they're actually just rewriting it in the JSON syntax. But it's the exact same set of commands as what is down here, just not in YAML. Okay, so that says the next thing to do is to deploy it to our account. So, all right, let's just review here. The first time you deploy, you can install a Bootstrap stack, which includes resources that are used for the toolkit. It includes an S3 bucket to store templates during deployment. So typically when we're using these command line based applications, they they will take stuff that you're writing and creating over here, will package it up into something like a zip file, put it up into AWS in an S3 bucket that it gets created as part of whatever toolkit you're working with, and then it reads files like this from the S3 bucket on the server. So rather than just taking this as a command directly to them through an API, they put it on S3 first in a bucket that they're going to manage for you. And then, so it becomes like an intermediary between your local computer and your AWS account or your actual stacks where resources are created. So this is kind of like your test area. Then there's like a staging area for this exact same stuff. And then they try to actually run it while it's sitting up in your S3 bucket. And so to set that S3 bucket up, we need to type in CDK bootstrap. So let's go ahead and do that. Whoops, wrong portion of the window. CDK bootstrap. And it looked like it was bouncing things around over here. So it must be doing something else with files. It's um, doing stuff with this document. Yippee. Like maybe they just created that because I don't think that was there a second ago. So while it's working, it's adding files in this CDK output folder uh, that you're not really supposed to be looking at. Uh-oh, it says that something has been canceled. So, well, it looks like there's a big fat error. Well, I'll find out what the big fat error was, and then I'll get back to you. Who knows? If it happens to me, it might happen to you. Okay, I'm back. That's one of the reasons why I do these videos is because this it's not that the instructions are hard to follow. It's just that oftentimes the instructions break, and that's where everybody get stuck. So I'll tell you the little rabbit hole that I just went down. So I ran the command, of course, which was CDK bootstrap. And first it said that I was looking at this message and it says I couldn't find the role. So I went into IAM and the role did exist exactly as it was supposed to. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just run it again. And I ran it a second time and it seems to be saying update rollback failed, and so it wouldn't run. And so then I kept going. So I was going into CloudFormation, seeing if I could see any stacks that were broken, that were stuck in some rollback situation, and that wasn't. I couldn't find anything in there. So to be honest, I'm still at a little bit of a loss. It would just say the same thing over and over again. So I thought, okay, what else could I do? And so what I did was I thought, well, whoops, oh no, I've lost control of my. There we go. I thought, well, something I can do is I can do let's see, I can type in AWS configure again in a terminal window, and let me just like basically start this from scratch again. So just get rid of everything I had before. And let's just pretend that maybe something's broken in US East 1 that I don't understand. So I'll just do AWS configure and say that I'm going to do this instead in US East 2. And so basically I went through all the same instructions again, where I just created the folder and I typed init and then bootstrap and in init synth and bootstrap, and then I had no problems. Now, I don't know where the problem is exactly at this point, but I will note that sometimes when I run code um, in the terminal in VS Code, I don't know if this is the case this time, but sometimes when I run code, do things, commands in this terminal window in VS Code, sometimes it introduces errors when interacting with AWS. So maybe just to avoid that, I will just close this, even though it should be exactly the same, and I will just use the terminal window that comes with my computer instead. And so, therefore, I ran it in US East 2, I followed the steps, and all is good. So let's carry on. Now it says use CDK deploy to deploy the app. All right, so here we go. C CDK deploy, and that's actually, in a way, a dangerous command. Anything you do that involves CloudFormation on the back end for creating infrastructure can take a while. And let's see what it says here. I'm going to, looks like add and allow SQS messages. Okay, great. If it asks me for more questions to allow things, I'll say yes. So that's an IAM statement change. Uh, there could be other things. All right, looks like it's doing lots of stuff, and I guess that's why we have toolkits, so they can do lots of stuff, lots of creation and progress of services in the AWS environment that are based on the little bit of code that we were looking at previously. So I actually have this twice now. So this is the second one I just created, identical to the first. And so I believe it's running this code right here. So really just creating a few services, but doing an awful lot of talking about that. And it looks like everything went fine. So yippee. Okay, so over here it says it's making a security related change on our behalf. Output does look like that. And it says go to the CloudFormation console, and we should see that it created a stack for us. Um, all right, fair enough. Let's go see what we do have in there. So I'm going to go to CloudFormation. You could just type it in the search bar. And here's my stacks. Oh, but I'm not in North Virginia. Now I'm in US East 2. And it's showing that it just created that and that at the same time. So, and I'm just curious what those resources are that it created. So if I go under Toolkit and I go under Resources, it says it created roles and parameters and repositories and roles and policies and a bucket policy. All right. Well, I trust you that you needed all that. And then let's go to this other one, and I click on resources for this, and it looks like it has different ways of looking at it, but individual resources being a queue, a subscription, a queue policy, and a topic. So this particular one right here seems to correspond to our code, which is right here. So it created two different ones. All right, so let's carry on. There we are, our resource tab. We see what was created. And let's see. In this chapter, we'll write some CDK code. Instead of the SNS SQS code that we have in our app now, we'll add a Lambda function with an API gateway endpoint in front of it. All right, fair enough. Users will be able to hit any URL in the endpoint and they'll receive a heartwarming message greeting from our function. Okay, fair enough. Um, Okay, so I don't know. In this picture, this seems to imply, I can't remember how this works, but in this picture, it seems like we're going to be doing this instead of using the existing code that's in there. So I can't, we'll have to see if we're doing this from scratch or in parallel as something completely new and throwing away the existing stuff. I can't remember. Let's see what happens. Okay, delete the sample code from your stack. Okay. Ah, I know why we're doing that. That makes perfect sense. So let me just say at a high level, um, in the library folder right here, we have a bunch of code that gave us like some starter stuff. And so the interesting thing about infrastructure as code is as you change this, it usually keeps track of all the resources or always keeps track of all the resources on the server so that when you change something, getting rid of very important components of your infrastructure, it knows that. So when we get rid of this and say add a couple other things, it's going to rip this out in our running AWS service in the stack where it's currently running, and then add in some new things. So that's kind of the magic about all this. So kind of wild if you think about it. We're going to write JavaScript code, and by changing our JavaScript code, it's going to say, oh, you no longer have a queue in there, and you no longer have a topic in there. And so we're going to delete it. So interesting stuff. All right. So I believe, so let's open this up and remove everything and make it look like this. Fair enough. Let's go ahead and do that. So look at all this stuff. I'm going to get rid of all of that. Copy, paste, save. And now we're going to use the diff command, CDK diff. All right, so I'm going to write CDK. And by the way, this is in my second version of this project. I'm going to write CDK diff. And it should tell us that if we were to run this code, what it is that we would be deleting in the infrastructure and what it would be that we would be adding. So we'll see like maybe possibly some red minuses like that. And then we could possibly see some pluses. So it says we're going to get rid of that. And then, so that's correct. But did it show anything about a plus? I don't see. It says we're going to destroy all these things that are in there. Did we? I didn't look at the code too carefully. What about the plus? Oh yeah, this says nothing here. That's why there's no plus. Okay, so that's what it says we're going to do. We're going to destroy four things that are up there right now. And let's go ahead and make that happen. Okay, fair enough. So even though we saw the diagram of what we're going to do, all we're doing is creating an empty code thing of code right now. So CDK deploy. Hopefully I hit save. Let me just double check. Yes, I did. And this could take a minute. So just in case it takes more than a couple seconds, I will hit pause. All right, that seemed like it took a good minute or so, but it was saying, delete in progress, delete and complete for the things that it was getting rid of. So by using the CDK diff, we saw the things that we were going to do, and then by doing CDK deploy, it actually executed the changes. So this is good, seeing how the process works. Okay, so now we're going to start working on some coding. So actually, just make sure that everything is as intended. So that's with deleting. Now we're going to start working on a Lambda. Okay, so create a directory called Lambda in the root of your project, CDK Workshop, um, next to bin and lib. Okay, so parallel to bin and lib. So let's go ahead and do that. So just right here, I will say, oops, nope, don't want it in there. Let's see, how can oh, if I clicked out there, then I can do Lambda. Okay, so it's parallel then with my other key folders, and this is where I'm going to start creating some good stuff. All right, and the file is going to be called, add a file in there called hello.js and put this in it. All right, so here we go. New file, hello.js, and in goes some code. And if you've had classes from me before, you know about Lambda functions and that this is the function name for an entry point for a Lambda function. And so we look in here, and this one logs to uh, CloudWatch something, and then it just returns to the calling service this success message and a body saying where, anyway, just hello world essentially. All right, so we've written a Lambda function. Now it says we need to install the Lambda construct library. The AWS CDK is shipped with a lot of constructs called the construct library. It's divided into modules. You can read about them more here. All right, let's just peek at it really quick. All right, so this makes sense. So the CDK, look at all the different services that you have here for AWS. I'm going to assume for fun, like EC2 might be something that would be in there. And so then there would be all kinds of commands for interacting with those sorts of things. So before I look at Lambda, let me just look at EC2 because I know a little bit more about that. And well, anyway, it looks like there's a whole ton of classes. So at a high level, again, we're using software code that would generate ultimately what we're shooting for here is we're using software code that will generate infrastructure as code in CloudFormation that we never have to see if we don't want to. But we do need to know how to write the configuration for an EC2 instance or a Lambda function or whatever. And man, holy cow, that was a lot of stuff that all seemed to be just under one service, which is called EC2. So let's see if I can um, find the top of that and collapse it. So if we're looking at Lambda functions and things we could do, it's also going to be big and fat and well, it's got a bunch of stuff in there. So I don't know how much of that I want to know. But it's there if we care. But for right now, we're not going deep into some big application. We're just going to be aware of, we just need to know enough to do the tutorial and then know how to get back to it. Oh, this tells a little bit about how it's organized. So this is for the service package. A subscript means it's only CloudFormation resources. I'm not sure what that means. Uh, Packages that don't start with AWS are framework. Okay, I have no idea what they're talking about. All right, let's see. A few words about copying and pasting. We recommend you type the code, probably because you will learn more that way. Um, oh, and it also says you'll get to see some auto completion potentially, which is not a bad thing. Nevertheless, I'm not going to do that today. Add an AWS Lambda function to your stack. So in lib CDK Workshop stack.ts, we want to, oh, so right there, let's see, we should see something uh, that says nothing here. Well, oh, we're going to need that too. All right, let's just go back and compare back and forth for a second. So in CDK Workshop stack.ts, so I go live CDK Workshop stack.ts. So there's nothing here. So we're going to need to add in this file. So our actual application is here, if you will. But here is where we define the infrastructure, the AWS resource that we typically or initially would create by going through the AWS console and saying, create a Lambda function or create an EC2 instance. We write the code that does that kind of stuff here in this file. And so we need to import a library for Lambda, and then we need to put that Lambda code there. And rather than potentially making a mistake by missing something, I think I only need to make two insertions. But in case there's more than that, I'll just copy and paste the whole thing. So I think we just are going to need this row and then this stuff, and I think everything else is the same. But just in case, I'll take it all. I'll copy paste. So now here's the infrastructure that will show up, and then this is code that will go in it. And we're saying that we want to go into the Lambda folder to get the code that we're going to use in there. And it's basically hello, which is weird. I mean, it's a weird syntax, but it's look for the hello.js file and look for the handler function in there. And that's what's going to be used in association with this Lambda function. Cool. All right. So Um, let's go ahead and yeah, we're not going to do all the reading. Um, I think maybe we'll stop shortly after this. We'll see. Let's go to since we hit save there. Let's do CDK if. And so if you run this, it should say that it's going to tell you with a little plus sign that we're going to be adding a Lambda function this time, assuming I hit save with everything correctly. And then there we go. Oh, it says we're going to need to add a role. This makes sense. With Lambda functions, they need to be able to talk to CloudFormation or no, sorry, CloudWatch, the logging service. And then it says we're also going to be creating a Lambda function if we run this. And so both of those are true. And so let's go CDK deploy. Oops. And actually, let's just live wild. Instead of doing it right here, let's see if this will work. So I'll say terminal, new terminal, and I'll say C, and the folder is the same path as what you see here. And I'll type CDK deploy. And unfortunately, that could take as long as a minute. It looks like well, so first it checked what it was going to do. This could easily take a minute. And in the meantime, let's kind kind of go out and look at what's going to happen next. It says, hey, after this thing is done, um, we can, after this thing is done, we should see it in the Lambda portion of our console. And if we, let's see, what's it? It's telling us how we can test it in there. Let's go ahead and read about that. Click on the function name, uh, create a test from function overview, enter the name test for our test function. We're going to use the template API Gateway AWS proxy. So I know exactly what they're doing there. So for that, let's go over to our console and type in Lambda. And here's the Lambda function that has been created. Let's see if it actually says it's done. So while I was talking 44 seconds and change, it did say that it was done. So I will, so while I'm looking at my function, okay, list of functions in US East 2, click on it. And if I wanted to, I could look at the code here. It's got an integrated thing. So our code got uploaded from our local computer into this environment. If I do test, I'll call this test. And I want to use API Gateway proxy. So it's basically creating a fake, a pre-filled JSON document as if it was what it would get from API Gateway. And I'm just going to hit, well, I guess I can hit save, and then I'll hit test. And this is what it sent back. Hello, um, hello from CDK. So here's hello world. Once we actually have API Gateway set up, it would return this back to like a web browser. But right now we just did it by running it within the AWS environment. All right. And that's what it says would have happened. All right. This says optional, and then we have the API Gateway portion. All right. So let me just take a break real quick, and then I'll come back. All right. I was just checking my calendar because I have a meeting in about 10 minutes that I got to go to. So I'll have to probably pause again, I suppose. It says optional CDK watch. So this will just make it so that you can have faster deployments. Let's just look at this CDK deploy. What was the trick there with the um, anyway, there's something in here about how long this takes, and you can make it faster if you do CDK deploy hot swap. I'll leave it for you to go ahead and do that. Um, so just these are just some things that are, if I recall correctly, are just going to facilitate. So this shows facilitate deployments. So just notice that on a recent time that we did a deployment, it took 40 seconds, 45 seconds almost. So this section is just talking about how you can make it so it'll deploy faster when you're in the development stages. Let's go ahead and look at API Gateway and see how big this is. Okay, I think I could do this in about 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we come back to our this particular page where we're doing our infrastructure. And in addition to the Lambda function, there's another piece of code that creates an API, an API gateway, and we're going to connect it to our we're going to connect it to our Lambda function. So not much infrastructure wise. So we take that, we come over to our infrastructure code page, Control A, Control V, Control S, we do CDK diff, and it's going to tell us about, what's going to be different if we actually deploy that. It's going to say, oh, we're going to add that, most likely. And, actually, it says it's going to add a whole bunch of things. So whole list of stuff, and I like to look at the column. Well, no, that's oh, this is IAM statement changes. So just permissions, a whole block of permission changes are what's going to have to happen, and wow, and it's saying that you're going to have to add all this stuff, mostly permissions, but the first one's the REST API. And I didn't, so I see that there, but I was wondering if it was going to show up. Oh well, IAM statement. I was just looking for if it said anywhere up there like the REST API itself. But at any rate, it's going to add a whole bunch of stuff. So we'll just say CDK deploy and run it. And yeah, so all kinds of little pluses for things it's going to add. So CDK deploy, I'm assuming that's going to take a minute or two. Whoops. Looks like we have to confirm that. And then it's going to spit out the URL of our API, and we could put it into a web browser or we can run it locally. So hopefully that goes quickly. I think just because it might take a minute, I will go ahead and pause. Of course, the second that I pause, it's done. So here is the URL that it spit out. And if I take that and paste it in, there it is. It returns it through an API, an actual URL, the code that's in our Lambda function. All right, so let me just kind of review what's happened so far. So we initialized a project in CDK that has all this stuff in it, and it really has, two important parts. One is there's a file that creates infrastructure like Lambda functions, API gateways, and if this was something else, it could be, EC2 instances, VPCs, etc. So we have one file that's going to create the infrastructure, and then we have maybe another folder which contains our application, typically the thing that we have, stored in a Git repository that's going to do so, it's going to do all of our good stuff. So if you think about development a little bit differently, rather than developing locally and then figuring out a way to get it into the cloud, you're doing both things at once, and you could check this code along with this uh, code into your repository simultaneously, and then you have a way of well, one of the nice things is now you're just using one programming language for everything. So you could just focus on being a Python expert or a JavaScript expert and using that for both creating your infrastructure and for writing your application. And you don't have to be thinking about how can I write a CloudFormation template or how do I use the HashiCorp language for template language for doing Terraform and stuff like that. You could just stay in one language and do all of your development that way. All right, so I'm not going to do any more of the workshop from here. It doesn't look like there's too much there, so it looks like we got through most of it. So if you want to do the rest, just jump in and follow along, and I trust that this will definitely have gotten you started. So I wish you a fantastic day wherever you're at. Take care.